Excellent. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to the Southeast Regional Webinar Series. My name is Jimmy Glenos. I'm the VP of Programming for ICF South Florida. We are so happy to be able to kick off 2023 with a good friend of mine, Reiner Lomb, and we're going to do a little bio. I'm going to talk a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into a nice little interview in just a few minutes. But yeah, keep on letting us know if you're just jumping in here where everybody's calling in from, because this is always fun to see the scope. How far and wide do people come from? I've got another Seal Beach, California, which is right next to Long Beach. Welcome, Jeff. Oh, my friend Rochelle Stone. She is calling in from Clearwater, Florida. Oh, are you on vacation? I didn't know that's where you were. We've got people from Nashville, from Houston, from Austin, from Memphis, double from Memphis. Wow, we got a lot of Tennessee turnout today. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you for volunteering to come to this event today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Rochelle lives in, I didn't know that. Well, welcome, Rochelle. That's good to see you here. Christine Rozier from Raleigh, North Carolina. Awesome. So people are coming in. We got about 60, Reiner. It's getting full in here, so we should probably get things started. Wonderful. I am going to hold on. I've got to find a screen share thing. You know, it's always new with me. I'm always trying to figure something out here. So let me do this, share my screen, get this thing out of the way, get this thing out of the way. Oh boy. All right, everybody, welcome to the Southeast Regional Webinar Series. We are happy to present this, and there will be a recording, and Angie will be taking care of the CCEUs and all of that stuff. I did want to say that this is a collaboration between the 16 chapters that make up the Southeast region. We offer continued learning so that you get your CCEUs, and we can provide the very finest learning for professional development for everyone. Interact online with other coaches. This is what the series does. And engage in high quality professional development while learning CCEUs, as you can see on the screen, and as I just read to you. So today we are doing 7 critical emotions to lead with confidence and grow your influence with Reiner Lomb. And I'm really excited. I don't know if you guys got to listen to the podcast, but we did do a podcast with Reiner. It was on my podcast, but it was also on our Coach's Corner with ICF South Florida. It was a great interview there. And he was very gracious to come back again to join us. So I'm really happy about this. In the chat box, would you go ahead and say, what would you like to gain from today's webinar? I'd love to see what you guys are hoping. You know, you decided to come here for an hour and a half today, kind of in the middle of your lunch or after it, or maybe even before. So let me know what you might want to gain from this webinar today, and go ahead and put that in the chat so we can take a look, and I'll read out a couple of those once we see what we've got going on there. Of course, they all have to come in super fast, so I can't read them, right? Looking to be more influential, the importance of emotions in the work of coaching, for sure. Yeah, what are the 7 emotions? If you haven't read the book yet, you don't even know what they are yet, do you? Curious about the 7 emotions, or the emotions, for sure. Confidence in approach, very, very nice. Awesome. Yeah, what are the 7 emotions? Well, you know what? We're going to find out in this next 90 minutes, that is for sure. Oh, the positive and negative impact of emotions in the workplace. Whoa, Liz Garcia, first ever event. Sweet, after joining the Austin chapter. Well done, welcome, welcome. Hopefully we don't let you down on this one, being your first. Better able to recognize the emotions and how they relate to influence, understanding the 7 emotions, and also the CCEU. Excellent. So we are definitely going to get into the emotional intelligence and all those emotions. Let me tell you a little bit about Reiner before we get started. So Reiner is the founder of Boomerang Coach, an executive coaching firm specializing in leadership and career development, innovation, and transformational change. He's the author of 2 books. Today, we're going to look at one of them a little more closely, Aspire, the 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, No Matter Where You Are, and his first book, The Boomerang Approach, Return to Purpose and Ignite Your Passion. Now, before becoming an executive coach, Reiner had a 30-year career in technology, started and developed software businesses, and led leadership development at Hewlett-Packard. At Hewlett-Packard, his home for 20 plus years, he launched new software product businesses and helped grow HP Software into a multi-billion-dollar organization. While at HP, Reiner discovered his passion and talent in leadership development, where he trained leaders in how to scale from leading oneself to leading others to leading an entire organization. His mission is to mobilize and develop leaders to create a more sustainable and positive future for all. Now, Reiner did grow up in the western part of divided Germany during the Cold War, and Reiner's heartache over his country's role in the Holocaust and World War II awoke in him a lifelong desire to address the challenges that threaten future generations. And as an executive coach, Reiner works with leaders and change makers in a wide range of organizations, from startups and multinational companies to nonprofits and local communities who all aspire to create transformational change. And with that, I do want to say, for any questions, you do want to contact Angie Holleran. She is the fearless and wonderful leader of our Southeast region, and you can see her contact information on the screen right now. I am going to introduce Reiner to the screen here, if you can't see him already. And let me just minimize this thing. I'm going to stop my share. And I think we're good to go. All right, Reiner, welcome.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to be with you here and with everybody else that has joined us from around the country and other places.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you here. I'm pretty excited about today. Let's see here. So I know that we have a poll question that we want to ask the audience. I know we've already asked them one question to put in where they came from, and then even wanted to know what they want to get out of this. But I do want to see, Angie, if you can put the poll up, if we can see the poll. There we go. So please think about an issue you deeply care about, and how much do you believe that you can create positive change? So go ahead and write in your answers there. There we go. We're getting a little bit of fun. Look at that. The responses are coming in so fast. Right now, it looks like people do agree that they can create positive change. We'll see what happens by the end of it. All right. Well, we've got almost 100% participation. Getting pretty close there. All right. Well, it looks like we've got everybody who's going to. I know some people are on phone, so they might not be able to put an answer in there. Angie, if you can show us the results, please. There we go. So as you can see, people do believe that they, so 49% say strongly agree, 48% say somewhat, and then 2 people said neither agree nor disagree. Reiner, what do you make of that?
Well, this is really very good news to me. This audience obviously is an audience of coaches and focusing on helping people to create change, right? So it's very unusual, because I very often when I ask the same question, I have a more mixed picture. So there's a significant number of people that don't believe they can create change, and obviously thinking of something big in the world, right? Issues they care about, and say, I'm not sure how I can create change. So this is a little bit an unusual, and I compliment you for your answers. Thank you.
I was thinking the same thing. I thought it would be a little bit more dispersed, but in that it's a group of all coaches on here, I think that's our jobs, right? To make positive change. So I think that it's not surprising that it's this unified in the answers there. So I do want to ask another question to the audience here, and this one, again, you guys can write this one into the chat. So what do you think it takes to create positive change? So what do you think it takes to create positive change? Go ahead and write that in the chat, and we'll take a look at some of those. Passion, awareness, willingness, desire, influence, positive mindset, trust, discipline. Oh my gosh, so many good answers. And a lot of repeats. Courage, value alignment. There's a good one. The burning platform. Thank you, Thomas, for the burning platform. Oh, an open mind, commitment. Absolutely. There's so many good answers in here. Reiner, what do you make of these answers? Because now we've got a variety of answers here.
Well, I think I'm very impressed. I maybe we don't have to teach anything in this session, and we can make it shorter. But it's really some of these things that are mentioned in the emotional space, like trust, like passion, and so on. We will dive into those a little bit better. So thank you for the answers. It's very impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the interaction and you guys getting into the chat so well. So thank you so much for all of your answers there. And I look forward to seeing what else comes up in the chat, because this is great. Okay, so let me ask you this. So I've read the book. I think it's amazing. Everybody on the call today should definitely get Aspire, the 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, no matter where you are. So my question, Reiner, is what are the premises that this book is built upon?
Yeah, so there's 3 premises. The first one is that everybody, each of you here on the call, and I would say that to people around the world, can create positive change. If you identify an area that you deeply care about, like the question you asked before, and you all answered it basically. So most of you, the vast majority also already believes that. And so that's the first premise that you can. The second premise is, in order to create change, in order to influence change, requires a change in behavior. Starting with your own behavior first, and then influencing others to change their behavior. And what drives our behavior, there's no action we take or no behavior that we engage in that is not driven by our emotions, that not affected by our emotions. So emotions are a very powerful driver of our behaviors. And in order to change behavior, we need to learn. Some mentioned emotional intelligence and other similar words used here, is in order to influence behavior, to change behavior, to be able to change our emotions, right? From an undesired emotion that doesn't help with that behavior we're looking for, to a desired behavior that supports an emotion that supports that behavior. So these are the 3 premises. The reason, and you mentioned 7 emotions. Why did I, focus on 7 emotions? I will later go into those and explain them in detail and how they work. But there's, depending on who you talk to, which experts, but there's more than 200, some say over 250 emotions. And we discover new ones. And there's also cultural differences. I can mention a few emotions that we have in the German culture and in the language, but they don't exist in the English language. So sometimes it's hard to translate them. But in general, they are translatable, and it's very hard to learn more than 200 emotions, right? Especially in our society, in our system, where we have not learned emotions. We don't learn them in school. We don't learn them in the university. We don't learn them in the corporate world. Actually, in the past, people were encouraged to not think about emotions, right? And not to be emotional. So now that is changing, right? Because we are more insightful about it, and there's more research being done, and books being written about it, and so on. So in order to learn, to make it easy, I focused on those that are most essential, that both from research as well as from my own practical experience as a leader and as a coach, that I found most useful if a leader who wants to create change, who wants to lead change, what are the emotions that are most essential to learn? That doesn't mean that the others are not important, but this is a good starting point. Okay.
No, makes sense. As we talk about leaders, you're talking about emotions a lot, but I think, having been a former leader for a few different organizations, usually what we need to do is we need to focus on action. Like, what are the behaviors? So what are we doing? How are we moving forward? And how are we, being more productive and getting greater performance out of our teams? We don't usually think about emotions too much. So why do you think that emotions are so important for leaders? And even as I kind of know about as coaches, but why are emotions important for leaders when it usually boils down to action and results?
Yeah. So if you think about, let's say, let me offer a definition of leadership, right? So a leader has to be able to create an aspirational vision of a future, like understand the current situation and have a vision of how to change that situation, right? How to that's true for any kind of issue in the world, right? So the leader that wants to create a change in a specific area needs to come up with a vision and then influence people to change their behavior to make that vision a reality, right? An example would be somebody starting a new business, an entrepreneur, or it's somebody inside a large company, an entrepreneur, wants to create a new product business or a new service business or whatever, starts with the vision, but then the person needs to mobilize people, right? And then make sure they behave in a way and they act in a way towards that vision. Since our behaviors and our action are strongly driven by our emotions. So, for example, a leader, in order to be able to look into the future and to see a positive future, needs to be optimistic. If the leader is not optimistic, so when I walk into an organization where the leader that I'm coaching or the group of leaders are not optimistic, they cannot be visionary leaders. And I will give more examples later of that. That would be an example, but without learning emotions, without being able to read the emotions of the stakeholders and influence those emotions in a positive way, a leader is not able to lead and change behavior.
Very interesting. So there's a couple of comments in the chat that are making me smile. Lauren and Anik both say, in Lauren's case, my German father used to say that emotions are foolishness with many exclamation points. He was stoic, non-communicative man. And Anik also says it was the same with her Austrian father. So is that sort of uniquely, stoicism and emotions are foolishness? Is that a Germanic thing, or I mean, it's obviously it goes around, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's we have been raised and I have been raised in Germany, right? Luckily, I had a father and a mother. And well, my father was more rationally driven. My mother was more emotionally driven. She taught me more about emotions and so on, not as consciously, but in the way she raised me and so on. And so I think it's very important to understand that. Now children very often they learn more. The teachers have become more conscious about it. Managers become more conscious about it. Many of you who are coaching in this field, by your answers and by your comments, I can see that you have a lot of knowledge in this space. So the awareness has been risen. The first literature that came out was in the mid-90s, right? About emotional intelligence and so on. But at that point, a big change didn't happen yet, because just rationally understanding that emotions are important doesn't mean you can learn them. You become emotionally more intelligent. I walk into companies that have done assessments and then coaching based on those emotional intelligence testing, and not much has changed. So just knowing about the emotions is not enough. You have also to learn to practice them. So that's why in Aspire, I put a lot of best practices in saying, how can you cultivate, can you learn and develop that emotion, which basically you need to learn it. You need to not just learn about it, you need also to learn it.
Absolutely. I agree. That was one of the things that I loved about reading the book was the practicality and the little mini case studies in there of interactions and how when you bring emotions into it, it actually helps the situation and it's a win-win for both parties. So to me, I think putting in those little anecdotes, those stories in there that are actual experiences really helps solidify the ideas behind this. Now, before we go deeper into back into the book, Reiner, I did want to ask, if you could share just a little bit about how your experience of living through the reunification of East and West Germany, how that helped shape Aspire, how it shaped the Aspire leadership model.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jimmy. So far we talked about a leader influencing the behavior of a person or a team of people through emotions, right? So emotional competence. This example that I'm sharing about the reunification of Germany and the fall of the wall and so on, that is extensively used as a case study in the book, is really an example of how a shift in emotions changes a behavior at scale. Now, we have seen that at other movements. I could have taken the civil rights movement. I could have taken, Gandhi's movement in India to free India from colonialism and many other or large corporate change, transformational changes and so on. But I use this because it's very close to me and I was observing it very closely. So I grew up in Germany. You mentioned that before. I grew up on the western side, close to the east border, to the border to East Germany. When the Berlin Wall was built, I was 5 years old. So I have no memory of actually a time before the wall and the Iron Curtain didn't exist. So it was for me always a divided country. I personally, when I was growing up, I had no optimism that the wall ever would fall or the border would, the Iron Curtain would disappear and the country would be ever reunited. I just didn't have the historical context and experience, life experience at that time. So while I could speak up freely on my side of the border, my cousin Heinz on the other side was executed just for speaking up. Now that was during the Stalin era, but even after the Stalin era, the people were still, there was a system in place driven by the Stasi, which was the secret service there. Secret police would monitor and suppress the people. So whenever there was the slightest sense of opposition or critique of the system or the government, they would immediately put people in prison or they would destroy their careers, they would take their jobs away and they would punish them and so on. And so it was a very suppressive system. So until 1989, in the summer of 1989, the mood in East Germany was still very pessimistic. So people were fleeing in the thousands. I know a little bit more about it because a friend of mine who I also share in the book, her story, Anke, she was escaping. She was from Leipzig, where the whole peaceful revolution started. In 1989, in the summer, end of July, she was fleeing from East Germany because she didn't have any hope that things would change. And change means like people wanted freedom and they wanted democracy. They wanted to be able to elect a government that would understand their needs and that would meet their needs, right? And that was not the case. So people were escaping different routes. Hungary was one route that was the border was not as solid and people could escape and so on. So some might remember the pictures from that time on TV and so on. But then, so in end of July, August, the mood was still very pessimistic that anything change was possible. But by the beginning of September, following the Monday Peace Prayers that were hosted by two local pastors in Leipzig, in Nikolai Church, people were, after the Monday Peace Prayer, they were going out into the streets and demonstrating peacefully. It started on September 4th with only a handful of people. Others were still afraid. But Monday after Monday, that these peace prayers repeated, and then the peaceful demonstrations outside in the street were also continuing. And that number of people grew to 70,000, to 130,000, to 320,000, just in a few weeks. Okay, so by October 23rd, Monday, October 23rd, 320,000 people were marching in the streets of Leipzig peacefully. More people, Leipzig was a city of 500,000 people, then were watching from behind the curtain, watching the march and so on. And this was all under monitoring with secret police and military and so on. And people were still very disciplined and no violence was happening. Now this spilled over to other cities, and millions of people around the country in multiple cities, including Berlin and others, were demonstrating also peacefully in the street. And on November 9th, basically, when by accident, a government official, his name is Jürgen Schabowski, announced to an international group of press people that the border would be opened at midnight for anybody who has a valid passport, East German, to travel to the West or just cross the border. A supervisor for the Bornholmer Straße border crossing was just eating his sandwich, and when he heard on TV, he was in the cafeteria at work there at the border. He was totally shocked, and he said, "What's going on there?" He called his boss, and the boss said, "No, that's nonsense." His supervisor basically, he said, "That's nonsense. It's a mistake. You don't, under no circumstances, you're going to open the border." He would people would rush to the border because the announcement, they would shout, open the gate, and the crowd became bigger and bigger, also more threatening. His wanted to get the machine guns out to, to shoot at them and scare them off. And he instructed them not to do that, going to do that. But after a really very hard struggle, internal struggle with himself and this communication with his supervisor, getting the orders not to open the border, he finally single-handedly decided to open the gate and let people pass. And then I don't know how many here on this call saw then the cheering, people, thousands in the streets of Berlin and climbing up the wall and starting to dismantle and drinking champagne, opening champagne bottles and beer and stuff like that, and celebrating ecstatically what nobody could believe. Even the top politicians, both on the West and the East, were totally surprised by it. And when Harald Jäger, the supervisor that was opening the gate at that time, was later asked about, how his heroic act, he was saying, this was not me, this was the people. Wow. So this is an example where people from fear, from hopelessness, shifted in a very short time to optimism and courage, going to the street and creating a transformational change, right? So we talked first one-on-one, a leader influencing people. This was where an idea, where an inspirational vision of freedom and democracy was moving so many people, and also giving them the courage to do it by seeing others doing it and following in their footsteps and so on. So this was the power of emotions. It's a very powerful example of an emotional shift. Now leaders can create that. Leader can inspire people and mobilize them, right? They can incite optimism and so on versus pessimism. So you can create this emotional shift. So that's why I use this example.
Yeah, it's a great example. It's hard to figure out how it sounds like the crowd created the emotion to change one person's mind, and it changed the world. Obviously, it certainly changed Germany, Berlin, but it changed the world based on so many people bringing this in. So it's very interesting how this all happened.
Yeah, and I need to say again that there's many small pieces that I cannot, like, it's too much to explain in such a short time, but those two young pastors played an important role to provide a safe place for people in that church where they could share their grievances, and they put it under the camouflage of prayers, right? But what it was really was for people to have a place that were dissatisfied with the status quo, that had no hope, to say, let's get together as a group of people and share and be together in that grievance. From that grievance, then in that safe place of the church, or relatively safe place, then going to the street was not as big a step than stepping out from their apartments into the street. They were already out there, and then saying, "Oh, we're already in the street. Now let's raise, ask for freedom and ask for democracy."
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a great introduction. I'm pretty excited to share the model with everybody. So Reiner, do you mind if I share the first slide of the model, and that way we can talk about that? So let me go back to sharing. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay. One moment, please. And okay, so here we are on the first slide here.
Yeah. So before we talked about 7. So this is built like a pyramid from the bottom up, and the reason is that these emotions and leadership behaviors build on each other. So on the left side, you see the emotions, which I call them emotional drivers, that drive the behaviors on the right side, the leadership behavior on the right side. And so let me talk about the first 3, because they built the foundation of the pyramid. There's empathy, compassion, and interest. And empathy drives caring. So what I'm talking about, there's different types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy and there's emotional empathy. Emotional empathy, more we feel we resonate with the emotion of another person. And that drives caring. Now, caring is critical as a foundation. If with the leaders in an organization, if we don't believe that they care, we're not going to trust them. We're not going to follow them. We're not going to support them wholeheartedly. Okay, we might have some rational reasons why we do the job, but people talk about quiet quitting, right? They talk about not being fully engaged, fully committed, showing, putting more effort in that than what they have to do, and so on. So this is one foundation. We know that caring organizations with a caring culture perform much better than organizations that don't have a caring culture. Okay, now you can, let's say, you can care about somebody's needs and so on, but if you don't act on it, it doesn't help really, right? So you need also to follow up and then do something. If your friend's, best friend's mother dies, and she calls you and says, my mother died, and you say, I'm so sorry, and you worry all night and you care all night, but you don't go over and maybe cook a meal for your friend, it's not going to do much, right? So that's why compassion comes in. Compassion is the emotion that includes empathy and builds on empathy, but it adds the commitment to act on that empathy, on that caring. Okay, so to alleviate the suffering of another person, to meet the needs of another person, empathy helps you to feel the lack of the satisfaction of that need, but compassion commits you to it. And again, I have to say here, like the great world religions, they have been teaching compassion, for thousands of years, basically. There, it's like a virtue. But what I mean here, you really feel it. Not just a virtue. Somebody rationally tells you have to be compassionate. This is meaning a leader has to feel compassionate, right? So, maybe when you call a call center, your PC is broken or whatever, a product, and you call somebody, and somebody pretends to have empathy for you and pretends to have compassion, but it's not really there. And sometimes you have a person that really cares about, what you need, and that person goes out of their way to help you. Right. So that's the difference. We immediately see when somebody is really empathetic and compassionate versus somebody is just told to be empathetic and compassionate. It's difficult to feel, to have that feeling, to have that emotion. Now, on top of empathy and compassion is interest. And interest is the emotion that makes you really want to learn and understand an issue deeply. So if you're a leader, or you coach a leader that is asked to create a change, let's say you have a leader in the healthcare system to transform a hospital or a healthcare system or whatever, something, I use that as an example. If that leader doesn't understand what he or she is talking about, he's not going to be able to create a vision or come up with solutions that meet the needs of that system, right? So that's where interest comes in. There's I recently read the biography of Angela Merkel about her time as the Chancellor of Germany, and she was among all these other world leaders going to these G7 summits and to the G20 summits and so on. And she was known that, what they were writing in the biography, I don't know, I haven't seen it in person, but that she always came prepared. She always had read up on the issues. Other world leaders very often did not. They did not understand what they were talking about. But she was by training a scientist. She was a physicist, and she really was very curious and very interested. So the type of leader that was really always very interested and tried to understand the issues before taking action or before coming up with a better vision of the future. So those three emotions are really the foundation of the pyramid that helps you understand better and provide the motivation for you as a leader or the people that you coach, the leaders that you coach, to act. And when you coach somebody and you see there's a deficiency in that area, you will have issues later on in the other competencies that I'm showing you next. Okay. And I'm going to show you how they fit together.
Got it. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's not surprising that Angela Merkel was so successful in her leadership, coming with so much understanding and doing her homework and doing the research before coming in. There's an interesting fun fact from the chat. The chat says caring connection has a 0.58 correlation to leadership effectiveness, and that's according to the Leadership Circle. That's a pretty high correlation. So it seems like caring and connection is pretty important to being a great leader. Oh, actually, Timothy has just updated it. He says now it's 0.65. I don't know if that's because of the great work you've just done in this 30 minutes, but apparently the number has gone up to 0.65. So good work, Reiner. You're making an impact right here in this webinar.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of studies being done on this, and it confirms really how important caring is. And we personally experience it, right, in the workplace and so on. We immediately see when somebody is not a caring leader and what the negative effect is on the people this person is leading or the business this person is leading.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what can happen with that absolutely free resource that we have of caring, what it can do for productivity and performance and happiness on the job. And it literally costs nothing. It's just how we emote and how we behave around people around us.
And I want to add one more thing on this, since this was mentioned, because this is very often with these emotions and the behaviors, it's not binary, right? So we have, I would say, people that are closer to us, our inner circle, let's say our family, our children, spouses, partners, friends, colleagues, and so on. It's easier for us to have empathy, compassion, and interest in their lives, in their needs, and so on. And so it's also easier to show those behaviors for us. Now what the challenge is very often people that are outside of our circle, that are further away from us, that are maybe part of so in society we see this, right? People live in bubbles, right? So people are like, it's us and them, and we have less ability to show these emotions or feel these emotions for people that we don't know, right? So I just want to make this not very binary. Sometimes it's the question also, how can I expand my circle of empathy, compassion, and interest beyond the people that I have that already for, so that I feel that already for those emotions. I had a leader I coached a while ago. He had a hard time to show empathy and compassion for people outside of his inner circle. And that's very hard to be a leader if you have a company, right? Because you have clients that are, if you want to reach clients that are outside of your circle, you have to have empathy to feel and understand what their needs are. You have to have compassion to serve them, and you need to be interested in their needs and in the systems that serve those needs. Right. So that's the real leadership challenge. And we know from research that have been done that, like, the higher somebody climbs in the corporate world, the lower the empathy and compassion are, unfortunately.
Right. Well, and it's probably just a measure of the distance of being further and further away from what the
possibly
that's one
that would be one explanation, Jimmy. No, but there could be. Are you frozen? Hello, Jimmy. Can you hear me? Let me type into the chat if people can still hear me. Okay, so it's just Jimmy. Jimmy, can you type into the or advance the slides? Okay. While we're waiting for Jimmy, let me go. Even if the slide is not up, I think we lost him. So he's probably he's coming back. No. Okay. Anyway, so he's disconnected. But before I come on, let me go to the next three without the visual. So on top of empathy, compassion, and interest, the next three emotions are optimism, inspiration, and trust. So optimism is critical for a leader in order to look into the future, in order to be able to be a visionary leader. I have an example of somebody that I coached. I call him Jack, not to reveal his name, but his boss complained about him, like when he asked him to take coaching, to say that he is not a visionary leader. He's just putting out fires, very reactive. He was working like crazy, and he performed well in general, but he just, was not looking much into the future. So optimism, he lacked optimism. And in his particular case, as I started the coaching with him, what I found is what kept him from being optimistic, from being able to look into the future, was that he lived in the past. So the critique by his boss constantly telling him that he's not good enough, what he's doing, that he's not a visionary leader, made him resentful. And feeling resentment is an emotion of the past. It's something that happened to you, and that story of victimhood is repeatedly, you rehashing that, you're ruminating on it, and it keeps you in the past. Okay. I'm seeing you now. I see, Angie, that you're sharing the slide. Thank you. I can see that. Okay. So in order for Jack to shift to optimism, I needed to help him in the coaching to get out of resentment, and the way we did that is basically that I helped him to accept the things that happened to him in the past. Okay. So he learned to accept the things that he could not change. For example, the things that his boss had said or somebody else had said that he was resentful about. Accepting it and putting in the past then helped him from acceptance to shift to optimism. So sometimes we cannot make a direct shift from one emotion to the next. We need some intermediate emotion. And this is such an example where you cannot shift from resentment to optimism directly. You need to first shift to acceptance. Okay. Now, on top of so let's say you have a leader that you coach, and that leader is a visionary leader, and he sees a clear vision. Then the question is about really mobilizing people for that vision. So if you start a company and it's an entrepreneur or it's an intrapreneur or any kind of change maker, he still needs to have the right expertise, the right people to mobilize the right resources, including funding, money, investors, experts in different fields that are necessary to make this business successful. And that requires inspiration. Okay. So to inspire people is a very critical skill of a leader. Now, a leader needs to feel inspired, him or herself, in order to inspire others. You don't necessarily have to be a charismatic leader. There's a lot of different ways you can inspire, and we can later go a little bit deeper into those. But one big misbelief people have, that I have coached or in workshops, is that they're not trying to inspire because some people believe I need to be charismatic and I'm not charismatic. And so I hear that those stories quite frequently, but that's not true. You can inspire in many different ways. And actually, the pyramid is built in a way that those lower emotional competencies and behavioral competencies help you later also to inspire people. So caring and compassionate support is one example how you can help people to act towards your vision. Now, when you have mobilized people, you still need to coordinate effective actions. You need to set goals, you need to set milestones, you need to create plans, and people need to collaborate. Okay. In order to collaborate, people need to trust each other. Okay. And it's easier said than done. We know that trust is a big issue. I just was reading 2 days ago, some of you might have seen it, the latest Gallup survey on which professions from an ethical perspective are most admired, right? Most trusted. And it turned out that business executives were very low. They were close to car salesmen. And no offense to car salesmen, but it's just a perception that people have. People like representatives in Congress and so on also have a very low, that people have low trust in them. And that's, again, this is a perception. If they deserve it or not, I don't want to say that here, but it is an issue, right? If you're not trusted as a leader, it's a very hard time to lead people, to create coordinated actions towards your goals. Okay, so optimism, inspiration, trust built on empathy, compassion, and interest. And you can see here the connection to the lower tree. So if you as a leader, to trust has multiple dimensions, right? You could, in terms of trust, you can now say, do I trust this leader, that the leader is caring? Do I trust that the leader is committed to serve my needs? Do I trust that the leader is really understanding what I need and understanding the issues? Do I trust that the leader is serious about the vision or has a vision even that I want to follow? And do I trust that the leader can mobilize enough resources, enough funding? So if somebody, let's say I advise startups quite a bit and then help also in the hiring process and selection, or advise people on what kind of competencies they need. And so very often people ask, does this leader have the ability to mobilize enough funding to keep the business going, right? In the first phase and the second phase and the third phase of the startup and so on, okay? So Angie, can you put the slide forward to the next one? So the seventh emotion is really not a single emotion. It's a palette of emotions, positivity. And it includes some of the emotions that we mentioned here, like interest is a positive emotion, optimism, inspiration. These are all positive emotions. Positivity, and there's others like joy, awe, gratitude, and amusement, and many more. There's like 20 or 30. The nice thing with positive emotions is that it helps you to be resilient. So if you, let's say as a leader, now we're going up this pyramid, let's say we saw that during the pandemic, right? I was advising a lot of businesses during the pandemic as well. And people started businesses or were in the middle of executing, and suddenly the pandemic hit. And so things happen, setbacks, adversities, roadblocks. That's a normal part of life, right? And so leader needs to be resilient. The leader needs not just to be resilient himself, he needs also to cultivate resiliency within his or her organization or on the team, and also make sure that everybody contributes to the resiliency. And a leader can do that by cultivating positivity. So research has shown that positive emotions make people more resilient. Some of you, have seen the studies from John Gottman in terms of successful marriages, where Gottman can predict, based on observing couples, how negative or positive they behave with each other, if the marriage will be successful, if they will stay still together. Similar research has been done in general, also in terms of resiliency. And so there's different ratios suggested, like 3-to-1, 5-to-1, and so on. And so if during the course of the day or a time period, if you can, let's say in 90% of the time can stay positive, that will help you to be resilient. Okay, they measured even the stress level that people experience physically in a stressful situation, and how, when they shifted to positive emotions, how that made their pulse came down, the blood pressure came down, and things like that. So there was actually positive physical reaction, making people more resilient to deal with setbacks and with these kind of stress levels. Okay, so Angie, could you put the slide forward? Okay, so I like to summarize them, all 7. Okay, so empathy, compassion, and interest drive caring, serving, and understanding. If you feel these emotions, if you can cultivate them, and you can cultivate them, emotions can be learned, and you can cultivate them, this will drive those behaviors. If you don't feel them, if there's emotions that are in the way of caring, in the way of committing to serving, or in the way of understanding that let's say people, you're not interested in what you're leading, there's an issue, right? Then optimism, inspiration, and trust allows you to be a visionary leader, to mobilize people, and to cultivate collaboration. And then on top of that, when things go wrong, you experience setbacks, which is a normal part of life. Cultivating positivity enables you as a leader, or the leader that you coach, if you can coach a leader in that field, to stay positive, to shift to positivity, to be more resilient. I get very often calls, and you might too, that you have your regular coaching sessions, but you have also your coaching clients, your coaches calling you in a crisis situation. right? So I have that set up. I say, call me anytime, text me if beside our regular coaching sessions, if you need me. And that actually in the last 3 years happened more often than before. And one of the things I do, I actually, like a doctor has a thermometer or measuring the pulse or the blood pressure, I try to assess where the person is emotionally. And I can predict based on the emotional state the person is in the mood the person is in, what is possible for this person in terms of seeing possibilities for action, and making the right decision, but also acting. Okay, so if the person is like, I give the example of Jack, like through the stories he told me, I could sense he was in resentment. I verified it, and I could actually say resentment doesn't allow him to be optimistic, and it does not allow him to be a visionary leader for his team and what his boss asked him to do. That was an example of it. So you as a coach, you can use these emotions, but also others. In the book, I have a lot of emotions. I call this emotions that keep you, that are barriers to these behaviors, to these leadership behaviors on the right side. And these are the one that you see on the pyramid are the one that's supporting that behavior. So over time, you can actually learn all the barriers that are in the way, such as resentment. That's one barrier. But in the book, I have more examples of emotions that are barriers to these behaviors. And if you sense that these are based on the story somebody tells you, based on the body language, based on the mood you pick up, and you can verify that in the conversation, in the coaching conversation, you can actually assess what is possible for this person and what's not possible in behavior, and then help facilitate an emotional shift to the right emotions that the person needs in that moment in order to show the right leadership behavior. Okay. So it looks like that Jimmy is not coming back right now. So one of the questions I get asked very often is how can get a leader started on this, right? Does a leader have to learn these in the sequence from the bottom up? Now that's the best way, right? So if let's say if you lack empathy or you lack compassion, it is harder to be trusted, for example, right? Or if you lack interest in the topic that you're leading, then you have an issue to develop a vision, right? So these are the foundations that you need. But you can also see that sometimes, let's say I'm coming into a workshop or a coaching situation, the one that I described before, like with Czech, that I can identify very quickly a specific, like somebody is in a crisis, like Czech was, and I identify a weak spot, let's say lack of optimism, and then just working on that helps to move the person forward. It creates a shift, an immediate shift to the better. So you don't have to learn all these others. So you can basically take both approaches. So when each of you here listening, like if you go later back to the book itself, I have assessments at each of the chapters. So there's 7 chapters for each of these emotions, and how to assess them, how to learn them, what they mean, and how you can cultivate them, but also self-assessments. Where are you on these emotions? To specific important stakeholders again, right? Do you feel empathy? How, on a scale from 1 to 10, how empathetic do I feel with that person? How compassionate am I? And if not, what are the barriers? So I laid out the barriers. What keeps me from being compassionate? So sometimes we assess, like we see somebody showing a behavior that doesn't align with our values, and in our mind we say this person does not deserve my compassion because the person is behaving against our values, right? So we see by somebody, let's say, kicking a dog in the street on the side, and let's say we are dog lovers, we have empathy with the dog, but we cannot develop empathy and compassion for the person that kicks the dog. It's natural, right? Now I can take that to any kind of level. We can take it to the political leadership, we can take it to the corporate leadership, we can take it into families, circle of friends, the same thing. So each of these emotions here on the left has their barriers that keep you from feeling those emotions in a specific situation. when you need them. And the same is true for the people you're coaching. Okay, so for you as a coach, leader, be very aware. What is the behavior that is needed right now that the leader tries to cultivate, to show, and is not showing? And what is in the way of that? Okay. And I think Jimmy and I, we can give a little example of that, right? If you, a little bit later, how that can play out, how you can assess what keeps a person from behaving a certain way.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Angie, for covering for me there. I don't know what happened. My internet just gone, and I thought, oh, it'll be back in a second, and then it wasn't. So thank you very much for covering. I appreciate that. I love the recap here and being able to see the full model. So, of course, having this pyramid of emotions balanced with the behaviors that are attuned or aligned with them, I'm curious, how do leaders get started? Like, do we have to know all 7 of these and be proficient in all of them? Or what can we do to get started so that we can begin to build this pyramid so that we can be of benefit to the organization or to our clients?
Yeah, that's a question I put out earlier, and it's a very good and a very important question, Jimmy. I suggest to learn them bottom up if you have the time. But sometimes there's a situation where a leader's in a crisis mode. I give the example of Jack. I can give many other examples where you can quickly, you as a coach, you can help that person identify in the conversation what is missing right now, what is the behavior that is most critical. And just in that situation, you don't have time and say, go back and read the book and learn from the bottom up. You have to, it's kind of an intervention, right? In that moment, and say, what is missing right now? Let's say I have Jennifer, she's an example in the book. It's not her real name. She had an issue to motivate her team. And the barrier to that was really she didn't have any empathy for the team. She didn't have no empathy and compassion. So I was quickly able to identify that as a barrier and help her shift. So I didn't ask her learn all these 7 emotions. We just went right in there. And by that, creating an emotional shift for her, learning to put herself into the shoes of her team, what is keeping them from being motivated, and then help her come up with strategies to overcome those barriers, and then help her basically actually not just to motivation, to move to inspiration and mobilize them that way. So we lost Jimmy again. There's a
I'm here. Let's see. So we still have this slide up here. Are you ready for that second poll?
Yes, yes.
Would you like me to lower the slide or just keep it up along with the poll?
You can keep it up. I hope that Jimmy comes back. We had something planned together to present.
Okay. So here is I'm going to launch the question 2. Which of these 7 emotions is most challenging for you to practice?
Interesting.
Pretty spread out.
Mm-hmm. So far, trust is number 1 in terms of most challenging. Inspiration and trust are competing here. And I think we got everybody 100%. Yeah, thank you very much. So inspiration and trust are very close. And then interest and optimism. And this actually aligns with what I hear very often in workshops and in coaching situations as well. Trust is one of the more complex emotions. It has multiple dimensions and multiple directions. Like, do I trust the leader? Does the leader trust the people he or she's leading? And is the leader able to create trust or cultivate trust among the people who she is leading? The situation I have been in, very often I managed a lot of global teams or building and leading global teams in my corporate leadership roles. And because people, when I hired people, or sometimes I inherited teams, and people in different countries did not know each other personally. Maybe they got together on the phone. There was also a time when, let's say, Zoom and the easy virtual calls were not available as widely. There was some virtual abilities, but not as widely as it is now. But so people didn't know each other so well, and they were not able to get to know each other as a human being, as a colleague, and so on, like in the office, where people can build trust one-on-one. And in those situations, trust was always a big issue. And so my role as a leader was to create situations where people get to know each other. So for example, I did that to bring the team, if the budget allowed it, to bring once a quarter together globally in some place in the world, and I would rotate that. And then create exercises and create practices and situations where people can get to know each other as human beings, as colleagues, and that increased trust. And that I could actually see every time that happened, how the complaints about each other was going down. Right, before I would get called and people were complaining about the colleague in China or in Japan, or depending on where it was, or in Germany. And after that, those complaints were significantly reduced. People were collaborating more because because the trust had increased. So trust is very complex. So you have these three directions of trust. Me as a leader. Do you trust me as a leader? Do I trust you, the person, the team that I'm leading, the people? And can I create trust among the people, among my team members? But there's also the four dimensions of trust is, do I care? Right? Do you care? Do I trust that you care? Do I trust that you are competent? So that you're competent to do what you're saying to do in the hiring process, right? When we hire somebody new and you be aware of it, maybe you coach somebody that says, oh, I need to fill a critical role. And then it's the question about how can I trust the candidates? How can I learn to trust the candidates that they can do the job, that they have the competence? But even if somebody is competent, then the question is, I know that you can do this job, you can do this task. Are you going to do it reliably? Right? So that's the question of trust. Do I trust that you're reliable, that you're repeating and delivering every time with the same quality and the same what you promise that you would do, that you really do it? And then the fourth dimension of trust is really, do you mean what you say? Okay, so that goes then in terms of the intention. Do I trust your intention? Okay, and so that's about when people say you lied, saying we don't, when one person, we find out they behave differently than what they said, we stop trusting the person. And it takes a long time to rebuild it. So trust is, I'm not surprised that trust is here, the top candidate. Inspiration also, I talked a little bit about inspiration before. Most people and most leaders try still the carrot and stick method of mobilizing, of motivating people. Not super effective. You don't get the best out of people. And when you coach a leader, you can actually test the mindset in terms of that person. So I had this one coaching client, I mentioned before, Jennifer, she had a hard time to motivate her team. And she didn't try inspiration. She tried carrot and stick. She said, I pay you well, you'll have to perform well. Okay, but it was not the case. People stayed in the job, they were paid, they were doing what she asked to do, but they would not go beyond it. Okay, so they had kind of quietly quit, as we say today. We used to say they were not engaged, and they were not emotionally engaged. So it takes emotional engagement to feel inspired in order to give the best. So that's a very hard one. My recommendation is, I suggest in the book different ways to inspire people other than with charisma. So if somebody has charisma and some people have that talent and that natural ability and so on. That's a great thing. I'm not saying that's wrong. Use it to inspire. But there's other ways, like, for example, in terms of how you listen to a person, to their concern, to maybe, some of you might have learned situational leadership, right? So everybody needs a little bit of different types of coaching in order to feel confident to act, to feel inspired to act. And so that right coaching, that situational coaching approach, that can go a long way in terms of inspiring people to act. Compassionate support is just one example. Role modeling is another example. So very often we feel inspired by role models, and we actually, when we have a leader that actually behaves in a way that aligns with our values, then this person can inspire us. Sometimes what can inspire us, I saw in the East German peaceful revolution, there were three things that played. There was one, people were dissatisfied with the status quo, so they wanted a change, but it was not enough dissatisfaction. They also needed to believe that they needed to have a vision, a better vision that would replace their current life. Something, how would being free and being able to elect a government that cares about me and my needs, how would that life look like? So to envision that. And they saw that on TV in West Germany. So people that lived close to the border, they were able to watch West German TV, for example. So they saw how people, who were more free, could travel freely, how they could buy products they wanted, they could not buy in the East, for example. And so on and so on. So that vision, but they also, there was a third element in terms of inspiration, in terms of new insights. So sometimes that you say, in the new insight here, the new aha moment, the eureka moment for them was basically that Gorbachev had gained power, and he was a different kind of leader, and he promoted more liberal values and more democratic values. And so that new insight for them also gave them hope and optimism, and that inspired them also to act. So these are just, you see, those two are quite complex, but they can be learned for a leader, and you can coach in that area.
Hey, guess what? I'm back. Sort of.
Hi, Jimmy.
We'll see if Comcast wants me to be involved in this webinar any longer. I'm not sure.
Are they sabotaging you?
Yeah.
How are you feeling, Jimmy, now that you have been thrown out 3 times?
Well, I would say that my ego is a little bit bruised right now, but I'll be fine. So I know that we wanted to provide a little bit of like kind of a demo here. And as long as my internet can hold up, then that would be great. I'm not sure if it will, but I'm happy to see how it goes. I think I have a lot of feelings coming up right now. So.
Yeah, let's see how that goes, Jimmy. Let's see how
All
we
right,
can.
Let's go.
You're in a safe place here, so I just want to tell you, you're among each other, among friends.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I wanted to share actually with our listeners and the group of people, coaches here, a little bit of coaching approach that some of you might know already. Those of you who don't can maybe learn from it and as a best practice. But we talked about emotions, the drivers of the desired leadership behavior, and we're talking also about the barriers. And here I wanted to simulate a situation where maybe you coach somebody, or this could be a family situation, it could be a friend, or it could be at work, doesn't matter where it is. I will ask you, Jimmy, pick somebody that is important, the person you care about, that's somehow pertinent. This could be a colleague, this could be a client, it could be a family member, a friend, whoever that's really important to you, and whose behavior you don't agree with, that really frustrates you, and you wish you could change that behavior. You could wish that person would behave differently to their own benefit.
Yeah, I've got someone, and it's not my internet provider.
Okay, so do you want to share a little bit about that person? Like, just is it a friend? Is it a colleague? Is it a
It's actually, it's a family member, and I don't know how comfortable I am sharing about it, but it's my son, and he's 28, and he's on his own, he's married, he's got family and all that. But he, in my estimation, he makes a lot of mistakes, and he doesn't like to listen to fatherly advice. And so it's just a little bit frustrating sometimes.
What is the behavior that frustrates you most? That is observable, that you can see, that you can describe, you could make, like you can capture on a movie, on a camera?
Yeah. As I say this out loud, it makes me laugh, because I know that I can absolutely be the same way. So I know where it's coming from. But he doesn't like to take other people's advice necessarily. He wants to do what he wants to do because he thinks this is what he should do. And I tell him, buddy, you don't have to make all the mistakes. Like, listen to dad. I've been there. I've made the mistake. You don't have to make every mistake. Like, I'm telling you, this is going to be helpful. And he doesn't want to listen because he's independent and wants to do his own thing. And so, and he's also, he's not really truly on the spectrum. I mean, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, so I know there's going to be frustrations there, and he's going to behave differently than I do, or some other neurotypical people. So that's a frustration with me, because I don't know exactly what to do all the time. It's a hard place. And
yeah.
So that's basically what's happening.
Yeah, so it sounds like that the behavior that frustrates you, that when he's not open to other information, so he forms an opinion on something, he's going that route, and he's not open for other input or other ideas.
Right. Well, at least not from me.
Okay, so you don't know with other people, that you just when you she's not open to your feedback. Okay, good. That's good enough, right? So you like to offer some of your learnings, your experience, and you would like him. So your desired behavior, can you describe it a little bit more? Like ideally, how would you like him to behave in regard to that frustrating behavior?
Right. So again, as I say this out loud, I think about it and then say it. It sounds really silly, because what I want is for him to do what I would do. So that is, I should let him be his own person. Like, I know I want to micromanage to a certain degree. I want him to be free. I want him to do his thing, but the desired behavior is, no, don't do that thing you're doing.
So you have life experience, right? So and you from what worked for you, what didn't work, and you'd like him to learn from your experiences, and ideally maybe show behaviors that prove for you to be successful. Is that right? I think Jimmy froze again. Okay. So let me, I don't know how long it takes for him to come in, but so the next question that I would ask now, Jimmy, that he has identified the undesired behavior. Now you can translate that in your coaching situation, the undesired behavior that is observable to the desired behavior that is observable. Here is from rejecting, the undecided rejecting input from him, or even listening to it, or even considering it, to ideally listening to it, and if it's the right advice, to adopting it and maybe try it out. So that those two behaviors in contrast to establish. The next question that I would ask Jimmy is then, when it comes to this person, in this case his son, is putting yourself into the shoes with empathy. Oh, he's coming on. Jimmy, just setting up the next question for our listeners. So now establishing the two behaviors, the undesired and the desired behavior of rejecting your input, being not open to opening up to your input and considering it at least, is what do you think is in the way, either rationally or emotionally that keeps him from wanting to change that behavior?
Oh, I don't know if it's rational or emotional. That's a good question. How,
You
how
have
do
an
I know
idea?
that?
A hunch? Maybe just like try to put yourself into his shoes. Like,
I imagine it's an emotional thing.
and what kind of emotion do you think he's feeling that could be a barrier?
He probably thinks, why am I trying to tell him what to do with his life? Like, nobody's telling me what to do. Why should I tell him what to do? And so he probably feels frustrated with me trying to be micromanaging or bossy in some way.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think he's frustrated with my behavior.
Yeah. So frustration, no?
Mm-hmm.
It's a frustration about your behavior. So this is probably a very complex. Now we're speculating on it. We don't really know, and that's not the point of this exercise right now, because in a one-on-one conversation, we can navigate that. We can find out, we can have a theory, and then we can test, we can have a hunch, and then we can ask, is it this? Very often, I gave the example of Jack earlier with resentment. I just listened to his story. I had the hunch it could be resentment. And when I had enough evidence, I could say, what you're describing to me sounds like you're feeling resentment. He would think a little bit about it, and then I would describe what resentment means. And he said, yes, you're absolutely right. That's what I'm feeling. And I say, okay, now with that feeling, with that emotion as a barrier, now in this case, it's frustration, but we need to articulate frustration about what, right? About your behavior. He's frustrated about your behavior. Now we could ask then, why is he frustrated about your behavior? Is it a threat to his freedom?
Could be
A threat to the freedom to make his own mistakes and things like that? We're speculating right now, right? So in your conversation, you can navigate that, and you can actually have that. You can change the conversation to wanting him to do what you think is the right thing, to exploring why he's not listening. Why is he not considering? Maybe it's lack of trust. Maybe he said, Dad, I don't trust that you have the experience to tell me how I should live my life. No, could be. I don't know. I'm making up like some stories here just to illustrate this. So with that, let's make an assumption that he's frustrated about you trying him to tell what to do, and that would feel like you take away his freedom to make his own decisions. Let's just assume that for a moment. How could you behave differently? How could you change your own behavior that would help him to overcome that barrier of feeling frustrated about your behavior, that you're taking away the fear of you taking away his freedom to make his own decisions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I can start with empathy and tell him I understand, or I know how it might feel, because I used to be young and stupid. Not that he's stupid, but I used to be young and stupid. And I don't like my freedoms taken away. I mean, that is like, I don't like that at all. I like to be able to do what I want, when I want, how I want. And I know there's going to be guidelines. I know there's going to be parameters, limitations, or advice, but I still want to do things my way. And so I can definitely empathize because I feel it. I feel that that's the way I want to be too. And so I get it. So, coming from a space of empathy, of feeling exactly what he's feeling there, and letting him know that, hey, I get it. I've been there. I know what that feels like. And I'm not trying to make him feel like I'm taking away his freedoms, but I want what's best for him, as any father, would. So
yeah. And it's very hard for you because you're too close to it as a father, right? So you're not like to have that conversation. I'm a father too, and a grandfather, and it's harder to the one that are closer to us to coach them or help them than for somebody we don't have that closeness. There was actually a comment here, if that doesn't apply to all coaching, right? And it's true. This conversation applies to all coaching, understanding the barrier and of the person, which the emotional barrier is mostly much stronger than the rational barrier. Rational barriers you can overcome. Let's say somebody, I don't know how to do it. You can do hand holding and help the person how to do it or show the person. But if it's emotional, you need to create the emotional shift. You need to come over this frustration in the conversation. And I think you have an opening and starting point with empathy. I would add to that, and that's from my own experience, and I have tried that many times also with people that are close to me, to shift to compassion, to add the component of compassion. So empathy, yes, so you understand the barrier. Interest, obviously, is very important to really understand the whole dynamic, but also moving to compassion to yourself, that commitment where you don't have to come up with a solution. The only reason is for you, you want to be there when the person needs you and you can offer that help. But so that's an opening, right, for you. And then sometimes, Jimmy, it's also a question of patience too.
No, I can appreciate that too. Yes, I think there's a good opening. I will say this, I think the idea of stepping back like this and realizing that I can come from a position of empathy, you know, basically leading with empathy, creates an awareness that honestly, before we started talking about this, I didn't really think about, because, you know, you're either in the heat of the moment or it doesn't, you always think you know what's best. And so having this awareness of, oh, he's experiencing the same thing I did when I was his age or younger or older or whatever. And did I hear you say, someone in the comments said that, well, it doesn't apply to everything. Well, obviously no coaching experience applies to everything, but in response to that, I would say, as I'm thinking about this now with my son, this totally applies to something where I might be working with a colleague at work, and I may want to give this person some really hard direction on what to do, and understanding coming from an empathetic side, like, oh, they might not receive this very well because, and it might not be because of a frustration or a resentment, although it very well could be. Having that awareness and empathy for what the other person's going through can really change the way I approach that work with that person. So yeah. And obviously anytime it's a family member or a loved one, or, you know, even a really close friend, it's going to be all sorts of extra emotionally charged, because there's more at stake, and there's a lifetime of history, whereas in the workplace it's obviously much shorter lived, and
yeah,
stakes
you
are
have a clean slate. There's no emotional baggage. And I wanted to take that now to this example, right? It's kind of real. It happens every day. It happens in coaching and in the business world, in friends, in families, and so on. You can take that, because the topic of this is part of how you can lead with confidence and influence. You gain confidence by really understanding the other person and what drives their behavior and what are their barriers. And since leading is coming up with a vision and influencing people to help you support to achieve that vision, you have a vision for your son, for you as a family, and so on. So that's an example. You start with a vision and then influencing him, but also starting with your own behavior first. When you learn this, how to do that, you become super confident. I gave the example of Jack. He's a real person. When I first coached him, he had a handful of people, small team, 10, 15 people. He was struggling. He was micromanaging. Today, he's a leader of thousands of people. He's an admired leader. He's an inspiring leader. And by learning these emotional competencies, but really embodying them, but also teaching them and coaching his employees and his team members. So I've trained, all his leaders on this as well. And each of us has a weak spot when it comes to emotional or any kind of skill. And if we learn, if we shift there, which is an ongoing thing, it never ends. Learning the emotional space never ends. It's an ongoing thing for me. and for anybody. And when you don't learn, you slip back and so on. So I just want to say, so that confidence. But the other one in gaining influence is really the more people you can reach with this, the greater will become your influence. You can expand your circle of empathy.
Yeah.
You can expand your circle of compassion beyond the people that are close to you. You can expand your circle of interest. That's very critical. Let me understand those people that behave the way I'm frustrated about. Let me understand why that is, right?
Yeah.
So, and how can that change? And then you can expand your circle of optimism, your circle of inspiration. You can expand your circle of trust. And you can also expand your circle of positivity that you spread in the world around you. So that's how you influence. So by learning these emotions and applying them to more people, to more of your stakeholders outside your circle, it's how you grow as a leader. And when you as a coach, how you can help your coachee to grow their influence. And that's the approach in a nutshell that I have been taking for many years and for decades. Actually, as a leader myself, I've coached and grown many leaders in my teams and so on. So that's what I want to offer with this session.
That's fantastic. I do know that I'm looking at the clock right now. Thank you very much for being able to deal with my ins and outs through the webinar today. That was not the most fun, I can admit that, but I'm glad that everything worked out. Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Reiner, for being so gracious in there. Reiner, can you share your the last slide? I don't know if you're the one sharing or not, because I'm a little out of the loop right now.
I'm not. I don't have it here, but maybe Angie can share.
Oh, there we go. There it is. Thank you, Angie. So here's the call. So seriously, folks, I've read the book and I've gone through and looked at it again and again. It is fantastic. Everybody should run out and get the book. It's also, if you're not a big reader and you have long commutes or you just like to listen, there's also the audiobook version. So definitely check that out if that is your thing. And also leave a review, because as we all know, and certainly as authors, Reiner knows, reviews mean a lot. So go ahead and leave a review for the book. Let's see, what else do we need to talk about here? Besides the book, how else can people get in touch with you, Reiner?
Yeah, you can go to my website, reinerlomb.com, and there you can contact me, any kind of questions you have or you want to talk to me. That's the easiest way.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? And again, thank you very much for joining us today. This was fantastic. Thank you also for getting through the struggle with me, and that little coaching session, because that is actually helpful. And now I'm pretty excited. I don't normally want to hurry up and call my son, but now I kind of do. So that's going to be really great to.
Yeah, you ask if there's anything else. I want to close with a quote from Robert A.F. Thurman. Each of us individually has an effect on the lives of beings around us through the quiet processes going on in our minds. If we are full of good feelings, they radiate around us and people want to be near. If we are full of bad feelings, others tend to stay away. So if we would be activists for good, for the positive, we must assume responsibilities for our minds as well as our speech and our physical activities. Otherwise, our negative mental habits will track down the entire community of beings. On the other hand, when we break through into the liberty of the heart, mind, and spirit in the process of enlightenment, we free others at the same time. And that's what I like to encourage you to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reiner. Thank you, everybody on the call. This has been fantastic. Thank you, Angie. Reiner and Angie, you'll stick on the call with me afterwards, after we stop the recording and all that. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. Go out and get the book, Aspire, read it, listen to it, consume it. More importantly, use it. Use the book. You will find amazing stories and amazing use with your leaders, with your colleagues, and certainly with your clients, maybe even your family. So thank you, everybody, and take care. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.